Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Florida's Space Coast. I'm Will Robinson Smith, and I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage, as we are now T-minus 1 hour and counting to the next Falcon 9 launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We're broadcasting this evening from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm joined tonight by Stephen Young, who is running our graphics and technical elements behind the scenes, and our fearless photographer, photojournalist Adam Bernstein, who is out there swatting mosquitoes and operating our cameras. We're starting the broadcast here with a bit of a split screen. On the left is something we haven't actually seen for a while in this vantage point. A little dark to see, for the spotlights are not on it tonight, but that is in fact the mobile launcher that NASA used to support its Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft back on the Artemis 1 mission. We'll come back to why it's hanging out so far away from the vehicle assembly building in just a minute. But on the right is the star of the show this evening. That is Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. There you see SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket standing at the ready with another batch of Starlink satellites. We're now a little over 58 minutes from SpaceX attempting to launch the next batch of Starlink satellites for the Group 6-10 mission. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 11:36 p.m. Eastern. For our viewers joining us around the world, that's 0336 UTC. Now, if you've been keeping an eye on SpaceX's activities or our social media this evening, you may have noticed that the original launch time for this mission was 8:14 Eastern. However, SpaceX waived off that opportunity as well as their 9:55 p.m. slot, likely due to some of the poor weather that we saw earlier tonight. And thank you to the more than 900 of you that are joining us live. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, we'd appreciate if you could hit that like button and subscribe to this channel so you get notifications whenever new videos are posted, and you get notified of the live streams whenever we go live. Also, if you could share the stream, that would be fantastic. Helps more people find this live coverage and everything else going on with this channel. And naturally, we can't do these launch broadcasts without the support of our members and viewers. So, big thank you to everyone who has made a contribution to help fund our coverage. If you would like to go ahead and join in support of our coverage of the space program and working to expand that, we'd love it if you consider making a donation through the YouTube Super Chat feature or consider becoming a YouTube channel member. Our members get access to special member-only videos as well as discounts to our online shop, as well as 4K launch views. Right now we're about 20 minutes away from the point in which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. SpaceX is running the countdown for this mission from its Hangar X site here at Kennedy Space Center. It's the facility where they refurbish the Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights. At this point, SpaceX has conducted several launches from Hangar X. And in fact, they're preparing to manage their first crewed mission from that site as well. They've done a number of preparations and trial runs for that. The Crew 7 mission will launch from Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's happening no earlier than the morning of Friday, August 25th. SpaceX's launch team also gets support from its control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Busy night for California. In fact, a few hours from now, SpaceX is looking to launch another Falcon 9 rocket, that for the Starlink Group 7-1 mission. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Coming up in a bit, the launch director will conduct their go-no-go poll electronically. By now, the chief engineer should have already conducted a technical poll. T-minus 55 minutes and counting. Much like small talk in an elevator, let's talk about the weather. It's been another typical August evening here in Florida. We've seen some thunderstorms rolling through central Florida throughout tonight. Quite a bit of lightning we've seen behind the frame here at the pad at Space Launch Complex 40. If you want to see a great shot from earlier this evening of some lightning behind the rocket, you can head over to our social media over on X, formerly known as Twitter. You want to check out that photo. In fact, the pad you see here on your screen was in a Phase 1 lightning watch until about 9:50 or so this evening, so weather has been a watch item for SpaceX. Again, likely the reason why they pushed back from the earlier launch attempts tonight. Heading into their launch attempts this evening, the 45th Weather Squadron pegged the odds of favorable weather at the launch pad at the start of the launch window at only 20%. They forecast that would improve to 65% favorable launch conditions by the end of the window, which we are nearing now. Goes to just about midnight. Some of the concerns that 45th was tracking were anvil clouds, cumulus clouds, and of course, lightning. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a T0 of 11:36 p.m. Eastern, 03:36 UTC. SpaceX does have one more backup opportunity in this window. That's coming up right at the stroke of midnight, 0400 UTC. Of course, that opportunity is only available if SpaceX has not begun the process of propellant loading. So we're keeping an eye out for that as the clock continues to move forward towards its current launch time. However, if things don't pan out for SpaceX tonight, they also have a backup opportunity for them, as a matter of fact, that start on Thursday, August 17th, beginning at 7:49 p.m. Eastern, 23:49 UTC, and they last through 11:11 p.m. Eastern, or 03:11 UTC on August 18th, on Friday morning. T-minus 51 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. As I mentioned earlier, this has also been a busy day for NASA as well, bringing that split screen back. Mobile launcher is parked just outside of the gate at Launch Complex 39B here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. In fact, this is the first time that the ML-1 has returned to the pad since it supported the Artemis 1 mission to the moon back in November 2022. Taking a look at this time-lapse video from NASA, first motion started about 8:27 Eastern this morning when the crawler transporter began the slow trek out to the pad, traveling at a breakneck pace of about half a mile per hour. Now, once the mobile launcher arrives at the pad on Thursday, the crawler transporter will eventually be rolled back away and parked just down the road from the pad. After that, teams with NASA's Exploration Ground Systems will continue to perform upgrades on the mobile launcher and begin a series of tests to check out the systems needed to support astronauts on future Artemis missions, beginning with Artemis 2, set for no earlier than November 2024. That work includes continue to work on the crew access arm and the new emergency egress system. That system being built by local Space Coast contractor JP Donovan Construction. Mobile launcher stands about 380 feet tall and contains all the ground support equipment that the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft need, such as communications, fuel, power, and coolant. T-minus 48 minutes and counting. And we've just gotten a good update from SpaceX. Weather is now 90% favorable for liftoff at the new T0. So SpaceX continues to move forward, and we're now less than 10 minutes away from the team taking that go, no-go poll to begin propellant loading at T-minus 38 minutes. And speaking of which, while we're on the topic of things needing to happen before the T-minus 0 liftoff, let's go ahead and look at the countdown timeline for today's Starlink mission. As I mentioned a moment ago, T-minus 38 minutes will be when the SpaceX launch director gets the results of that go, no-go poll. If the go is given, propellant load will start at T-minus 35 minutes. Kerosene will be loaded onto the first and second stages simultaneously. At the same time, T-minus 35 minutes, liquid oxygen will also be pumped aboard the first stage of the rocket. At T-minus 16 minutes, liquid oxygen will start flowing into the second stage of the Falcon 9. Before this happens, though, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back at the launch pad as the feed lines continue to be chilled. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps. That's important because it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back begin to retract from the Falcon 9 rocket. Reclines to an angle of about 1.5 degrees or so, leaning just a little bit back from the Falcon 9. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point the strong back pulls back in a much more rapid fashion, getting out of the way as the Falcon 9 leaps off the pad. About 2 minutes before that point, though, liquid oxygen will be completely loaded onto the Falcon 9, fully fueled at that point with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And of course, if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy at time, Flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release, and the Falcon 9 will be off to the races at T-0. Coming up in 45 minutes and counting. T-minus 44 minutes and counting. We've talked about the timeline for the countdown. Let's talk a little bit about where this rocket happens to be going after it lifts off on the pad. Falcon 9 lifting off from the pad there at Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We'll fly in a southeast trajectory tonight toward the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one in use for this evening's launch happens to be a short fall of gravitas. Upper stage will then continue on with the Starlink satellites. The fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of the map. SpaceX will use one of its recovery vessels to retrieve those fairing halves. SpaceX's 2 recovery ships are named Bob and Doug, named after NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, which flew aboard the famous Demo 2 mission back in May 2020. SpaceX has 2 drone ships here on the East Coast. Just read the instructions in a short fall of gravitas. The other drone ship, of course, I Still Love You, is used over on the West Coast, and in fact will be used in a few hours supporting the Starlink 7-1 mission. Because of the adjustment in launch time tonight, SpaceX has also adjusted the T0 liftoff of the West Coast mission. Now looking at a launch time of 1:42 a.m. Pacific time, being 4:42 here on the East Coast, or 8:42 UTC. SpaceX will be launching a batch of 21 Starlink satellites on that mission from Space Launch Complex 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base. T-minus 40 minutes and counting. We're just a couple of minutes away from, we should be hearing the call for the go, no go poll results. Again, that's coming up at T-minus 38 minutes, assuming SpaceX continues to target 11:36 p.m. Eastern for the T0 of this mission. While we wait for that call out, let's take a look at where this particular mission, Starlink Group 6-10, will line up in SpaceX's history. This will be the 13th flight of this particular booster that you see there on the right side of your screen, tail number 1067. It is the 247th flight of a Falcon 9 rocket to date, 52nd Falcon 9 of this year. This will be the 55th orbital launch for SpaceX in calendar year 2023. This will be launch 139 from Pad 40 for SpaceX. And overall from Pad 40, this is the 194th launch. And if SpaceX is able to launch this Falcon 9 rocket in this attempt, this will be the 42nd launch from Florida Space Coast this year. T-minus 37 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX has not yet begun providing mission audio for this launch. So we're not hearing the results of the poll if it has in fact been taken and the results provided. SpaceX has not formally indicated that they are adjusting the launch time yet. That is something that we are keeping an eye on closely. Again, they have one more launch opportunity in this window at the stroke of midnight here on the East Coast. Otherwise, it'll turn into a proverbial pumpkin, and SpaceX will have to target its backup opportunities. Just as a quick reminder, if SpaceX is not able to launch tonight, those backup launch opportunities on Thursday start at 7:49 p.m. Eastern, 23:49 UTC, and run through 11:11 p.m. Eastern, 03:11 UTC on August 18th. It's just a hair after 11 o'clock here on the East Coast as we approach T-minus 35 minutes and counting if in fact SpaceX is on track for a launch at 11:36 tonight, the start of propellant loading on the first stage would begin now with both the RP1 as well as the liquid oxygen. So keep a weather eye on the lower part of the first stage there. See if we spot any signs of vapors forming. An indication that fueling has in fact begun. T-minus 32 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. Been keeping a close eye. Look down near the bottom of the first stage booster. You see some vapor there forming, an indication that SpaceX has indeed begun propellant load on the Falcon 9 rocket. So that being said, RP1 now flowing into both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9, and liquid oxygen also flowing into the first stage. T-minus 30 minutes and counting. Starting to see a lot more vapor near the bottom of the first stage of the Falcon 9 there. Good indication that fueling continues to move along smoothly. So we talked about the timeline. We've talked about the trajectory. Let's talk about what's on board, specifically these 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites. This is a photo of what they look like stacked in their launch configuration, taken before another Starlink launch. Little graphical error, but this in fact will be the 11th launch of these V2 mini satellites, each of them weighing about 1,760 pounds or 800 kilograms. After the solar panels unfurl, each satellite has a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers and were built in Redmond, Washington. That's near Seattle. T-minus 23 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Mission audio is now being broadcast as the countdown continues to move nominally for the launch of the Starlink 6-10 mission. Things continue to point towards liftoff at 11:36 p.m. Eastern. Just making a quick correction here on, we mentioned the number of launch of the Starlink V2 minis. This is in fact the 12th launch of this particular type of Starlink satellite. T-minus 20 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. We certainly appreciate the nearly 4,000 of you who are joining us in the live stream tonight for a late night Starlink launch. If you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, share the stream, that would be a big help in helping others to find our live launch coverage. And if you haven't already become a subscriber, you hit that subscribe button for free. It helps you keep up to date. You can hit the notification bell so you're able to see when our new videos go up, as well as future launch coverage.
Stage 2 fuel load complete.
And you see the start of the big vent there from the strong back. This fueling continues to move well here on the Starlink 6-10 mission. Talking a little bit about where the satellites will be going after liftoff. Taking a look at the approximate target orbit here. Falcon 9's upper stage will deliver the satellites to an apogee of about 182 miles, 293 kilometers. It'll be at an inclination of 43 degrees above the equator. Starlinks will use their thrusters over the following weeks and months to raise to their operational orbit. And there are more than 4,500 Starlink satellites on orbit as of today. T-minus 16 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. If you're just joining us, and I know we have a number of folks that have hopped in as we're approaching 5,000 with us live tonight, you're seeing the tapering off of the big vent coming up in about 30 seconds. The start of liquid oxygen flowing onto the second stage will begin. Just about a minute or two ago, you heard the call out as well for the completion of fueling.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
You hear the call out for stage 2 LOX loading beginning. Second stage is fully fueled with RP1, that rocket grade kerosene. As the countdown continues to move smoothly here. SpaceX continuing to work no apparent issues at this time. Weather trending in the right direction, as SpaceX mentioned just a little bit ago. The range is green, so no issues for lightning and winds at this time. T-minus 15 minutes and counting. As a Again, this is the 12th flight of the V2 mini satellites. A little bit of a difference between the version 1.5 and the V2 minis. V2 minis have 4 times the capacity, and they've introduced E-band for backhaul. They have upgraded phased array antennas. They're about 2.6 times heavier than the version 1.5 satellites. Probably why they are fewer per launch than the version 1.5. And they use argon hull thrusters, replacing the previously used krypton thrusters. And here's an image of what one of those looks like. SpaceX is currently offering Starlink internet service to more than 1.5 million customers around the world and is available in more than 60 countries. This is what the coverage map looks like at the moment, with the light blue areas having coverage and the darker shades showing a combination of waitlisted and coming soon nations. T-minus 12 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. T-minus 11 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Taking a peek at the live chat, want to thank a couple of folks for helping to support our live launch coverage with a couple of super chats here. Thank you to Celtic Spike 7, as well as Victor R, both chipping in $5 in super chats. Really appreciate the support of our coverage of the space program. Helps us do what we do and bring you this live launch coverage for all the missions launching from Florida's Space Coast. And coming up a little bit later in the evening or early morning here on the eastern coast, we'll have coverage of the Starlink 7-1 mission. So if you feel like sticking awake with us, or if you know some folks in Southern California that would like to catch a launch and want to hang out with us in the lead up to it, we'll bring that to you in just a few hours from now. And thank you to Chill Vibes for your $10 super chat. And thank you, Spaceflight, now for the great launch coverage. I appreciate you being here. And thank you to Victor R as well for a $2 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting us. And as we've crested 7,300 of you now watching live, as we are under 10 minutes in this countdown, if you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, that would certainly be a big help as well in helping more people find this live launch coverage as we approach the launch of the Starlink 6-10 mission in 9 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this is the 13th flight of this particular booster, tail number B1067. Let's wind the clock back and take a little bit of a look back in time at the booster history, starting with its debut back on June 3rd, 2021. That was the CRS-22 mission that launched more than 7,300 pounds of science and supplies up to the orbiting outpost of the International Space Station, along with a pair of rollout solar arrays. This happened to be the second mission under SpaceX's Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract with NASA. Next up for this booster was its first human-supporting mission, that being the Crew 3 launch on November 11th, 2021. The third launch came just over a month later on December 19th, 2021, with the launch of the Turksat 5B satellite. B-1067 flew a fourth time on April 27th, 2022, supporting the astronauts of the Crew 4 mission. That crew included NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins, who became the first black woman to serve a long-duration mission in space. Also happened to be the debut of the fourth and, to date, newest Crew Dragon spacecraft, dubbed Freedom. On July 14th, 2022, that was the fifth flight of B-1067 with another cargo Dragon. This time it was for the CRS-25 mission. Sent up more than 5,800 pounds of science and supplies to the space station with that mission. Following that, flight number 6 was the first Starlink mission for this particular booster, that being Group 4-34 on September 19th, 2022. Launch number 7 was the geostationary satellite Hotbird 13G for company Eutelsat that launched on November 3rd, 2022. Its final launch of 2022 came on December 16th with the launch of SES's O3B mPOWER 1 and 2 satellites. The next few missions were all Starlink launches for this booster, that being missions number 9 through 11. Those included Starlink 5-2 on January 26th, 5-5 on March 24th, and Starlink 5-9 on May 14th. And as we approach T-minus 6 minutes, 40 seconds and counting, the most recent mission for this booster came on June 18th of this year. Just 2 months ago, and it's ready to take flight for its mission number 13 tonight in just about 6.5 minutes.
Stage 1 fuel load complete.
T-minus 6 minutes and counting, and you heard the call out for Stage 2 load complete. And the first stage Merlin engine chill is also underway. In just about a minute, you'll see the start of the strong back retract, where the transport erector will tilt away about 1.5 degrees.
Tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
And here the call for the start of strong back retract. You'll see it start to tilt away from the Falcon 9 after the clamp arms open. It will remain in that position until right about liftoff, when it tilts back much more quickly, clearing the way for the Falcon 9 to leap off the pad. And you can see here in the SpaceX feed those clamp arms opening, and the transporter erector will tilt back.
Strong back lower.
And there you hear the good call out for that. As we approach the last few minutes of this launch, let's talk very briefly about the Falcon 9 vehicle itself. It stands about 70 meters or 229 feet tall and has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The bottom two-thirds of the rocket is the first stage there. Again, today's first stage booster flying for its 13th time. Tail number 1067. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Enter the call-out first stage when LOX loading completes. Now this rocket is fully fueled. Moving right along, above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side, you can see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. They're titanium winglets that help provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere like a dart. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. First stage main engine cutoff. The high-pressure helium is used to release those latches. 4 pneumatic pushers
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Ensure a clean separation. You hear the call-out for Stage 2 LOX loading complete. And now the rocket is fully fueled. Ready for launch in less than 2 minutes. T-minus 1 minute 37 seconds and counting. Moving up the second stage. This upper stage, powered by a single modified Merlin engine, Merlin vacuum, produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it'll be fired twice on today's flight. Place the 22 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. And lastly, up top, as we approach T-minus 1 minute and counting, is the payload fairings, made of a carbon composite material. They will be recovered a little bit farther downrange after fairing separation and ferried back to Port Canaveral, as will the first stage booster, and will be refurbished for flight in the future. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. In moments, we should hear the call out from the launch director verifying a go for launch.
LD, go for launch.
And there you hear that good call out. T-minus 30 seconds and counting now. The engine ignition sequence coming up at T-minus 3 seconds. Now T-minus 17 seconds and counting. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Starlink 6-10 mission, the 42nd mission launching from Florida Space Coast, climbing into the air above Florida's Space Coast, taking to the night sky. The first of potentially 2 missions for SpaceX this evening. T-plus 26 seconds and counting. As we're starting to hear the rumble of those 9 Merlin engines from here at the press side at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. So we are now about 40 seconds into the flight. It's T-plus 50 seconds now. Merlin engines are going to be throttling down as the vehicle approaches max Q. It's the point of greatest atmospheric pressure on the rocket. T-plus 1 minute 3 seconds. The rocket is now supersonic, traveling faster than the speed of sound. call out passing through max Q. T plus 1 minute, 30 seconds into the launch. Less than a minute left on the burn for the first stage. Still seeing some great images here on the tracking
And back
shots. Adam Bernstein doing an excellent job there, keeping that centered up for us, providing us great views of the Falcon 9 rocket supporting the Starlink 6-10 mission. Now 2 minutes into flight. And we are approaching main engine cutoff, or MECO. It's when the Merlin engines will shut down, followed by stage separation and the ignition of the upper stage, followed by the jettison of the payload fairings. And there you see on your screen, MECO, followed by stage separation.
MECO.
You hear the call out for that.
Confirmed.
And you see on your screen, this is from the onboard camera of stage separation. And you see that little dot in the middle of your screen, that is the Merlin vacuum engine coming to life. So we are now 3 minutes into flight. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see those grid fins starting to deploy on the left-hand side. The Falcon 9 first stage booster
Confirmed.
makes its way back. You have the call for fairing separation, and you see those Starlink V2 mini satellites being exposed to space now for the first time in this mission.
Vehicles are following a nominal trajectory.
And you're seeing the Merlin vacuum engine continuing its burn as we are now T plus 40 minutes,
signal, Bermuda.
30 seconds into this flight. You're seeing on your screen the trajectories of both the first and second stages as represented by those two blue lines. The entry burn for the Falcon 9 first stage set to begin in just about a minute from now. And you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen in the bottom corner, the speedometer for the first stage will start to drop dramatically as that first stage entry burn helps to hit the brakes, slowing down the first stage booster notably as it approaches the drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. A shortfall of gravitas being used tonight. Its altitude now continuing to fall as it approaches about 100 kilometers. T plus 5 minutes, 40 seconds into this mission. Now 20 seconds out from the start of the first stage entry burn. The burn will last until T plus 6 minutes, 32 seconds.
Both vehicles continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
Hear that good call out from SpaceX. Both the first stage and the second stage continuing nominally along their trajectory paths, which you see here represented graphically on the screen.
Stage 1 FTS has safe.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Hear the call out for the start of the stage 1 entry burn. As you see there on from the onboard cameras on the Falcon 9 first stage that started that entry burn. SpaceX's feed is on a bit of a lag from our real-time clock, so that's why you see the discrepancy between our T plus time and theirs.
Stage 1 entry burns shut down.
And you hear the call off for the
Stage
end of
2
the
FTS has safed.
entry burn shutdown. Coming up next at T plus 7 minutes, 59 seconds, the landing burn will begin. As the Stage 1 booster makes its way down to the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Coming up now in less than a minute. And as we approach that landing burn, you're seeing some good onboard camera views of the Merlin vacuum engine powering the second stage currently.
Stage 1 transonic.
That burn will continue for about another minute, a little bit less than that, until it cuts off at T plus 8 minutes, 38 seconds, the event known as Second Stage Engine Cutoff, or SECO 1. The second stage will then coast until T plus 53 minutes, 57 seconds. And the landing burn should be underway now.
Stage 1 landing burn.
And you see on the left-hand side of your
Stage
screen,
2 is in terminal guidance.
we have visuals now on the landing burn. The drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, should be coming into view momentarily. And there you see a nice crisp view
Stage
of
1
that.
landing leg deployed.
From the drone ship perspective, you see the drone ship coming into view. Legs deployed.
Stage 1 landing
And
burn.
a touchdown confirmation of this booster, tail number B1067, having successfully made its
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
13th launch and landing. Now preparing to return to
Yeah.
Port Canaveral for flight number 14 later on down the road. T plus 9 minutes and counting.
Good orbit insertion.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda.
And we do have that second engine cutoff. And so the second stage will continue coasting until T plus 53 minutes, 57 seconds, when the Merlin vacuum engine will reignite for 3 seconds. Just a quick burn. The Starlink satellites are expected to deploy at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 7 seconds. As you see, the second stage continuing along its nominal flight path, making its way toward the eastern tip of South America. T plus 11 minutes, 20 seconds into this flight. Want to take a peek over at the live chat here and thank all of you who have been with us so far for our launch coverage, especially those who have chipped in with super chat donations. See a $5 super chat from Rosie Wren, the queen of YouTube forever, with a $5 donation asking, do I work with NASA? Well, we certainly cover NASA, and our office is here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center.
Nominal orbit insertion.
I hear the call out for nominal orbit insertion as the Starlink mission continues to move along well. Also want to thank Joe Sicalo. Apologies, Joe, if I mispronounced your last name there, but thank you so much for the $10 super chat. And the $2 super chat from Bill and Kimberly Race. Really appreciate your support of our coverage. Taco Nation TV with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Taco Nation. Thanking us for the live stream. Well, thank you for being here and for all of those who have joined us live throughout the course of this coverage. And also want to thank Alexis Abadi for a $60 super chat. Really appreciate that. The support at that level, Alexis. That's very, very much appreciated. She says, go Falcon 9. Thank you for the fantastic coverage. Well, thank you for being here and for supporting our coverage and helping us bring it to you and to all the people who have joined us throughout this stream and who are hanging out with us right up to the end. We still have more than 5,000 of you joining us tonight. And with a successful liftoff, booster landing, I want to go ahead and revisit some of the stats from tonight's mission and where things fall for SpaceX. Again, this was the 13th flight of a Falcon 9 booster, tail number 1067. This launch marked the 247th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was the 52nd Falcon 9 launch of 2023, the 55th SpaceX Orbital launch of 2023. This was the 139th SpaceX Orbital launch from Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It marked the 194th overall orbital launch from Pad 40. It was the 42nd orbital launch from Cape Canaveral in 2023, and one more to add to all of this. This was the 99th dedicated Starlink launch to date for SpaceX. And if you have some caffeine handy or just want to stay up on sheer willpower of launch excitement, we do have one more Starlink launch on deck coming up in a few hours from the West Coast. Over at Vandenberg Space Force Base, coming up in the early morning hours here in the U.S. The Starlink 7-1 mission is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 1:42 a.m. Pacific time. For those of us here on the East Coast, that's 4:42 a.m. And for viewers joining around the world, that's 08:42 UTC. So we will have live commentary in the run-up to that mission as well. See here the transporter erector, the strong back leaning back as it was in the moments leading up to the launch of the Starlink 6-10 mission. SpaceX has implemented a new procedure, relatively speaking, into its turnaround and refurbishment of the pad, getting ready for future launches. Over the next several minutes or so, you'll start to see that Strong back start to tilt back into its upright and locked position. We want to put it in airplane tray table terms. It helps SpaceX be able to turn around this pad in just a matter of a few days, which has been their pattern as of late, launching roughly about every 4 days and some change from this launch pad. Taking a peek back at the super chats over in the live chat here. Possible Canadian donating a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Possible Canadian. Saying, I saw this on my feed a minute before launch and ran to show my sister, which is great. We love to share the experience of watching a launch. It's even better with family. So glad you got a chance for you and your sister to watch it live. And we're happy to bring it to you. Marty Aaron with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting our channel here, Marty. Really appreciate it. And a little thank you pear cartoon on the side. That's adorable. And Sherry Lynn Leader with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much for helping to support our coverage of the space program. Coming up on T plus 18 minutes and counting, you're taking a look at the trajectory of stage 2 on the right-hand side of your screen as the upper stage of the Falcon 9 cresting over the east side of South America as it continues on its coast phase. Again, that Merlin vacuum engine will reignite a little over half an hour from now at T plus 53 minutes, 57 seconds. And will burn for exactly 3 seconds before cutting off for a second time, SECO 2. And these Starlink satellites will deploy at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 7 seconds. T plus 20 minutes, 25 seconds and counting into this mission. See the second stage has finished passing over South America, continuing on its coast phase. Angling to fly past the southern tip of the African continent. You can still see a little bit of lightning in the far distance there behind the transporter rector and the pad there at Space Launch Complex 40. Of course, as you can also see by the lack of a rocket, the lightning did not prove a prohibitive issue for this mission, as it was able to launch just about 21 minutes ago and is now midway through its flight. And I see we were also just a little bit shy of 99,000 subscribers. So if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, it's free to do so. We appreciate the support. And if you've enjoyed the coverage tonight or some of the videos that you've seen here on the channel, if you can encourage other folks to subscribe to our channel and help us reach even more people and bring our coverage of the space program to them as well and into your lives if you haven't already subscribed, we appreciate you joining aboard our family here covering space. Speaking of which, we are not quite done just yet. For those of us staying awake in the launch coverage business tonight, we do have the Starlink 7-1 mission. Again, that is going to be launching from Vandenberg Space Force Base over in the Golden State, California. Launch time is 1:42 a.m. Pacific. For those of us here on the East Coast, that is 4:42 a.m. Eastern, 08:42 UTC. And that'll be launching a batch of 21 Starlink satellites. So, one less than we saw tonight, but no less exciting. I'll have to wait and see, though, if fog will prove to be a little bit of a visual hurdle, as sometimes proves to be the case over at Vandenberg. It can tend to be a little foggy around the pad, but nevertheless, once it launches, it should be hopefully good visibility for those who are hoping to catch a rocket launch along the southern part of California. Looking at the live chat, we see that Mitchell Wilbur has become a member at the pad leader level. Thank you for joining us, Mitchell, at the pad leader level. Really appreciate your support of our coverage at that level. As we approach T plus 25 minutes into this flight, we're now T plus 24 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up on this particular live stream. So thank you to the more than 2,600 of you that have hung tough with us through right till the end of this stream. But if you want to continue keeping tabs on what's going on with this particular mission and looking forward to the Starlink 7-1, you can hop right over to our other live stream right now. That is the Launchpad live stream, where we've got quad views of the happenings here in Florida, as well as Starbase over in Texas. And we'll be there to provide you updates on this Starlink 6-10 mission as it reaches its conclusion, the deployment of the 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites coming up in just a little bit here at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 7 seconds, as well as the coverage of the Starlink 7-1 mission. So for Stephen Young and Adam Bernstein, I'm Will Robinson-Smith for Spaceflight Now. As we are just a hair after midnight, we'll say so long for now. We'll see you on Launchpad Live, and on to the next launch. Have a good night.